So, after I got off the high horse that was binge watching the first season of The Owl House, Disney Plus recommended another show to me that claimed that it was pretty similar in premise, Amphibia. This show caught my eye since I've heard good things about it online and seen a few commercials for it that have me somewhat interested. Now, after watching it, I kinda had mixed feelings about the show's first season, which is what we're going to be focusing on in this video. Season 2 I feel like can be saved for another video, since I think the differences in what I have to say between the two seasons won't work well beside one another, so stay tuned for that. I know this is probably gonna piss off a lot of people since this really is a big opinion of mine to think this way towards season 1 of the show, so please keep in mind that these are simply my thoughts and interpretations of the show. And also, spoilers for the show from here forward. You have been warned. So, let's hop right into why I think season 1 of Amphibia is kinda overrated. Let's get something absolutely clear real quick. I love the premise that the show sets up. The synopsis of the story for the entire show is that 3 teenage friends uncover a mysterious music box that when opened sends them all to a strange world filled with talking amphibians, hence the name Amphibia. These girls are separated from one another once there, so they have to go on a journey through this new world to reunite with each other, learn what exactly this music box is, and find a way to use it to get back home. That sounds like a fantastic story on paper. It's just that for the majority of season 1, the show kinda does nothing with it. The first episode generally had me hooked as Anne, our main protagonist for the series, was stranded in this world and had to learn to get along with these frog people if she wanted to get back home. But after the first 2 episodes or so, you just get 3/4 of the season of filler. It honestly hurts just how poorly paced the overarching story is through this season. I mean, look at this. You get the first episode to set up the premise of the story and have an introduction to all these main characters, and then you have 3 or 4 episodes of just family shenanigans. And then out of nowhere, Anne finally decides to bring up the music box that got her into this mess, and Hop Hop instantly looks at a book showing that it's dangerous. After that, you get another 4 to 5 episodes that really don't serve a purpose to the overall story or anything that was mentioned before. But we then get an episode specifically dedicated to show what's going on with the other side of the story, and the cycle continues. You see what's going on here? The show is so reliant on having single story episodes that to remind the viewer that there is a bigger story, they just dump a lot of information into one spot and repeat the cycle. If this overarching story was to be panned out over more episodes, you manage to keep the viewer interested in the overall story of the show, but is still able to be entertained by the short episodic plot lines that make it a cartoon, instead of dumping all of the information into one spot of an episode. I hate to be that guy that compares things to other things, but if you want to see how an overarching story is paced well, check out The Owl House, Avatar, and Gravity Falls. But unfortunately, that's not how the story goes. They end up revealing all this important information into one spot and focusing on making episodic plot lines. I'm not saying that this is a horrible thing. It's nice to have a show that you can just sit down to watch and enjoy a bit of slice of life comedy, but the fact that they did set up an overarching story that ties it all together, I just can't overlook that. The episodic plots that come in between the overarching narrative are indeed fun, I will give them that, but after a while, I kinda began to lose interest since they started to feel a bit cliche and predictable with what exactly happens to them. The comedy also feels like it's a bit of a mixed bag, but that honestly happens a lot in the media since comedy and humor can be really subjective. And for this season, it really felt like the jokes really hit or really missed, at least for my tastes. This season also feels really limited to what it actually offers of this whole new world that is Amphibia, since the entirety of it just takes place in the small town of Warpwood. I will give credit that this is probably done intentionally so we can have the focus be more set on the introductions of all these characters, since Matt Braley, the show's creator, stated that he sees the whole series as a 3-act structure, and the first act in major cases tends to be the intro for the characters and world of the story. I will say that this is important to do when you're building a big story, but the thing is, to me, it just feels like we kinda get all the development that we need for the sake of the overarching narrative after the first few episodes. Take Anne and Sprig's friendship for example. The first few episodes is dedicated to them meeting for the first time and getting to know each other since Anne knows she's going to be stuck in Amphibia for a while. However, after the first few episodes, their friendship kinda stays static. It feels like there's no growth between them as friends, except for maybe a few rare moments scattered throughout the season. But some of those moments of friendship growth don't really occur until the plot actually needs them to come closer, further building onto the pacing problems that I mentioned before. They definitely did a good job in getting me interested and invested with our main characters, but with how little they do with them, it kinda just drags the season down. Sasha, for those of you that don't know, is one of the 3 friends that was sent to Amphibia when she and the other girls opened the music box, and is set up as being one of the show's main antagonists, or at least plays an important role in the series when the show first starts. However, when they end up in Amphibia, by contrast to Ant being somewhat welcomed into the Talking Frog Society of Wartwood, we see a short scene at the end of the first episode that shows that Sasha is in opposite circumstances. She's alone, in chains, unwelcomed by the people around her, and overall is in a darker part of this world being undertaken by the tougher, less caring toads. When I first watched the scene, I thought that the show's story was going to be split between these 2 characters as a way to show how each of them are adapting to this new world around them, and how their viewpoints may change by the end of the season if there was that chance of them reuniting. But that one scene that lasts for less than a minute featuring Sasha is the only time we get to see her until halfway into the season. We then have an episode that shows how she copes with being in toad jail and how she earned the respect, but that's really the only purpose of this episode. It mentions that she managed to manipulate some of the toads.
Hey there, Grimesy! What's that, like the 5th toad I've talked into leaving this week?
There's plenty more where that came from, and far more loyal than Percy.
Are you sure about that? You're not exactly Mr. Popular around here.
But that's the only mention of her doing anything before this. Why do the toads think they need her? How did they come across her? Has she tried to escape from them before? Did she just have the unfortunate luck of just poofing precisely into her cell? Is she worried about her friends? Or does she only care about herself at this point? Just what? Sadly, none of this is explained earlier. But you may think, oh, we still have half of the season left. Maybe it explains this later on. No, just no, it doesn't. It just doesn't. We don't ever get to see Sasha until the finale, which we'll talk about soon enough. Another thing about Sasha is that there's no establishment of what Anne and Sasha's relationship was like before they came to Amphibia. Anne goes on throughout the season about how much she cares about finding her friends, but why does she care about them that much? I really like this scene where Anne kinda unintentionally brings up Sasha and what their friendship was like back home.
Look, if a friend likes a pencil case, you get it for them. If your friend likes your new shoes, you give them to her. And if a friend wants you to steal a crazy music box from a thrift store, even if you really don't want to, you do it, okay? Because if you don't, they might not want to be your friend anymore.
Those lines of dialogue really made me wonder what kind of relationship that they had back home, and if she's maybe starting to think differently about their friendship. But since we don't really see anything between the two before the finale, we don't really get to see that intent behind that line. Sasha was really meant to be portrayed as a big deal in the story of Amphibia, but with how little they do with her this season, she just doesn't seem to build up the status that she needs to be an interesting antagonist. Now, don't get me wrong, the season 1 finale was good, probably the best episode of the season, but I still have some problems with it. I do think that it was neat to finally see Anne stand up to Sasha as we now see how much of a bad influence she is to Anne. But the thing is, all of the context of why she should stand up to her is all revealed in this one episode. However, they really did a great job in portraying Sasha as a bad influence. It's just that maybe I would appreciate it more if these kinds of actions were revealed slowly over the course of the season instead. Like, I don't know, maybe have Anne throughout the season bring up stories about her and Sasha's friendship as a way to tell the planters of what Earth is like and what kind of stuff she gets into, and maybe realizing that they weren't entirely the brightest things to do. Another thing that really bothered me the first time I watched this finale was the song choice of Lean On Me during the climax. I thought it was stupid the first time I heard it, but after rewatching it a few times, I've changed my mind about those allegations. It does a good enough job of showing the emotion that Anne and Sasha are showing, but I still think that there are better songs to fit this scene. Lean On Me isn't a bad one, just one that I think could be better. I mean, Sasha was about to kill herself. Kill herself. It's hard to be completely into this moment with a song like this in the background. This finale generally is one of my fondest memories of watching season 1 for the first time, but it just didn't feel built up as much as it should have. Most of the episodes before just didn't seem to portray that what was going on in the finale was too much of a big deal. No pun intended. When you look at the finale by itself, yeah, it's a big deal since it marks that Sasha's and Anne's friendship will never be the same from this moment on. It's just that the pacing and build-up that should have made this moment feel so impactful just didn't seem to be there. When finishing the first season, I had my hopes kinda low going into season 2, since I heard great things about it, but still I'm a bit down after my first impressions with season 1. I first started writing this script after watching the first few episodes of season 2, and now I've watched the entire season up to this point, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I'm gonna be making another video about season 2, why I think it's better than season 1 overall, and how it kinda saved the series to me, so stick around for that. Overall, I would give the first season of Amphibia a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10 depending on the day. It's not the best season of a lore cartoon that I've seen, but far from the worst. But this still isn't really my go-to recommendation for people who want to get into shows like this. That title will always belong to both The Owl House and Gravity Falls. The premise of the overarching story was cool enough to keep me interested to keep going, but man, it was really hard to get through all those filler episodes. The characters were pretty charming for the most part, but after a while, specifically the 4th or 5th episode of the season, it feels like we got all the development for the characters that we need for the sake of the overarching story, and we're just getting more episodic plot lines just to extend the length of the season. I was constantly wondering myself, when will the story actually matter, or when will the story get going again? Because that's the aspect of the show that really made me invested in it. You could tell that they were really trying to make a great overarching story, but it just seemed to be crowded by all these filler plot lines involving family shenanigans, which is still fun, but just didn't serve too much of a purpose to the overarching narrative. To be, I really think this season just really is kinda carried by its comedy and characters, which isn't a bad thing, it's just that I wish the overarching story was better well paced or suited for them. And that's why I think season 1 of Amphibia is kinda overrated.